Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Using the Level 4 Sales Apprenticeship to Further Develop Your Sales Career and Sales Team. My name is Dan Hodgetts, Head of Education here at the ISP, and I'm your host for today's event. The Sales Executive Level 4 Apprenticeship was originally released in November 2018, and since then we've seen over 700 salespeople achieve their apprenticeship across a variety of sales roles who have come from an even wider variety of sales sectors and employers. And so, on today's event, it's my pleasure today to introduce our speaker, David Bill. David is Group Managing Director of BMS Progress. As Managing Director of BMS Progress, David's mission is to improve performance and progress careers through world-class training and apprenticeships. BMS Progress's mission and key goal is to raise standards within professional selling and partnering with clients who understand the value of investing in their team skill set. If you are looking to elevate your sales team, close skills gaps, drive remarkable success in the business-to-business industry, then I want you to understand, and you want to understand how to do this via an apprenticeship pathway, you are definitely in the right place today. Good morning, David. Hope you're well.
Morning, Dan. Thank you.
Over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining. So, as Dan mentioned, the purpose of this webinar is predominantly aimed at sales leaders, HR professionals, L&D directors to help you to understand a little bit more about how you can use levy-funded training to improve performance and progress careers within your sales team using apprenticeship levy funds. So let's get started. What we're here to talk about is the Level 4 Sales Executive Apprenticeship Standard. That's the full name of the program. And it's one that, as Dan has been mentioned, has been launched now for a number of years, and we've seen huge amounts of success from teams and individuals alike going through this qualification. What I was aiming to do today is just to make sure we can give an overview of the basics of levy-funded training. Clearly, it is accredited and regulated, and there's therefore some compliance aspects that go with that. So I just wanted to talk a little bit more about that. Also, the mechanics of the apprenticeship program, the structure, the length, and the delivery model, because it's quite different from a traditional sales training program. And then finally, some hints and tips and some guidance as to whether or not this is right for your business or equally right for your sales team. So hopefully you'll leave today feeling a little bit more informed about how to use Levy, what the program looks like from a delivery model, and whether or not it's suitable for your business. What I thought would be helpful is to start off with a quick poll, just to get a sense of people's key challenges within their sales teams. So there's a number of areas there that we think sales leaders and other business professionals need to address when considering training and development. And some of the challenges that we understand that companies are facing are how to effectively attract new talent, once on board, how to maintain and keep them within the business. Obviously, then it's making sure they are performing and generating revenue and value for that organization. Another thing that's very common at the moment is people thinking about their succession plan, who is going to move the business forward and hopefully step into more senior roles. And then finally, any other challenges that you face. So I'll pop the poll up in a moment. If you can put your thoughts in there, we can then share those answers. Thank you.
No problem. So overwhelmingly, the biggest challenge that we can see people are facing is performance of individuals at 56%.
Crikey.
Followed
Okay.
by attraction of new salespeople at 22%. Succession planning at 17%. And retention of current salespeople at 6%.
Excellent. Okay, that's great. Okay, thank you all for completing that. So as Dan said, overwhelmingly 56% see their biggest challenge as performance of salespeople, followed by attraction, which we know in the current economy and some of the challenges in that sector and the landscape of the recruitment market, having a value proposition or an employer value proposition that is different from that of your competitors is super important. So hopefully we'll be able to address how the level 4 sales apprenticeship can help with both of those. Okay, so if we get into the detail, the first thing I wanted to explain about the level 4 sales apprenticeship and how it differs from traditional training programs is the length of the program. It's an 18-month program. The benefit of that, of course, is that's a sustained program of learning. Unlike a traditional sales training workshop of 1 or 2 days or a series of modules, this is that sustained program of learning that enables those learners to continually layer and build on to the learning that they are doing. Also, with this being a vocational training program, it enables them to apply that learning into their day-to-day job immediately. And the whole point of working with a provider is also to ensure that's being embedded so that you as the employer and the learner are seeing the real impact that is having on their day-to-day performance, but also on the long-term performance of the business. But I think that is also important to bear in mind, that 18-month program. So consider how that works for your business, whether you're able to commit to that level of training for the individual. Equally thinking about those individuals, are they still going to be in that position or in that department or in that role, etc. The other great thing about this program is it's delivered through, or should be delivered through, a blended learning model. And very simply, that means that the learning content is delivered through various different interventions. The reason most providers choose to do this is because 2 reasons. We all have slightly different learning preferences and like to absorb content in different ways. So therefore, it's important that we do mix up the way that those learners will learn. But equally, we want to keep it varied and interesting and practical and experiential. So by inviting those learners to participate in different tasks and exercises, keeps it interesting for them. So most of the programs that you consider from providers contain an element of group training, so the traditional classroom or virtual-based training sessions. We think they're really important because it gives that opportunity to mix, to share best practice, but also to work in that experiential environment, in that safe environment where you can really get the opportunity to practice and apply content whilst under the supervision of the trainer, the coach, your colleagues. Most programs, again, will be supported with an element of digital learning or e-learning that could often be delivered pre-workshop or post-workshop as a way to ensure the learners are getting in the right headspace prior to going into one of those workshops. And again, some learners like that distance learning element of a program. There's also a wide range of activities and ways of which people can access learning, but also then go about applying that into their job. So things such as research projects, activities that include shadowing or observations, spending time in other departments, spending time with colleagues, and really getting to think more about how they're going to put that learning into their job, contextualized into their world, and really make it have impact from day one. The other thing that is, I dare say, unique to apprenticeship standards is that with all providers on all levels of qualifications, the learners and the employers and line managers get the one-to-one support of a development coach. Somebody that's there to support that learner journey from start to end, which again, in my experience of delivering bespoke sales training programs for many years, cost restrictions would make that nigh on impossible to give that individual that level of support for the duration of the program. Delivered and supported by someone with occupational competence in professional selling, but equally has an in-depth knowledge of the standard, so is able to really help them navigate through the ups and downs of the curriculum. So in summary to that, 18-month program delivered through a blended method and supported both with trainers and coaches with occupational expertise to support that journey. 2 other things to consider when somebody as an individual or you as an employer are looking at investing in this program is the accreditations that will be gained. The first one, Ofqual, some of you may recognize. This is an Ofqual accredited and regulated program, as are all of the ISP programs. Ofqual is a Department of Education, and they are the body that awards and accredits GCSEs, A-levels, degrees, and now apprenticeship standards, so held in the highest regard within England. But also, and some would say more importantly, it's also aligned to the level 4 diploma with the Institute of Sales Professionals. So they would also achieve that level 4 in addition to their apprenticeship qualification. Some other benefits that come with that: when they enroll on the program, the learners get associate membership status of the Institute, which brings with it a huge amount of benefits: access to their learning portal, for example, their learning resources, to join a community of like-minded sales professionals who are investing in CPD. And I think that that badge of credibility, that person is undergoing professional development, and the whole aim of that is to help them to offer a greater level of service and support to your customers or prospects. So I think it's a real nice point of difference that we do encourage learners to promote either on their LinkedIn profiles or auto signatures, often even on business proposals, as a way of adding credibility to the work that they're undertaking. If we now look at a little bit more detail of the curriculum itself, apprenticeship standards at all levels are assessed through what's called knowledge, skills, and behaviours. So whether it's a level 2 or a level 7 in sales or marketing or finance, all apprenticeship standards are assessed through knowledge, skills, and behaviours. This level 4 qualification is classed as a higher level qualification. So in fact, it's equivalent to a foundation degree or year 1 of a degree course. So I think that's another thing to consider. It's a significant undertaking, not to be taken lightly by both the learner and the employer. But equally, I think that shows the true value of the qualification, that never before has someone been able to get a level 4 recognized qualification in professional selling. So it's a real trailblazing qualification for our industry. If you've had a moment to look through the knowledge, skills, and behaviors, and this is the minimum criteria that any provider should be delivering as part of your program. When we first got sight of this several years ago, delighted actually with that content. It covers all aspects of an end-to-end consultative sales process. So regardless of the role that your sales teams may do, whether in business development, account management, or key account management, there's elements of that program that are suitable for each of those roles. I won't talk through each of the bullet points, but as a training provider, we really focus on that middle column of skills. And that again is teaching all kinds of technique and methodology, from territory or call planning, journey planning, right through to how you plan and prepare and execute a consultative meeting, through that whole end-to-end process of customer needs analysis and the importance of great questioning and the art of questioning and listening, being able to really deliver the story behind your value proposition, and not just the benefits and the features, but also some of the insight and the case studies and the statistics maybe that will bring that to life and really add value. And a big part of the program is, again, is helping people to continually move that sales process forward, to overcome any of the hurdles or obstacles that may come up along the way, and to give people the confidence to gain commitment, even through the negotiation if required. Now, at that part, we really encourage people to recognize the difference between discounting and negotiating, and become really confident at looking at what trading variables they have to offer and how they can offer high perceived value to that customer through a negotiation with less impact, certainly less impact than discounting to the business. But equally, we work a lot with those learners now that are starting to develop portfolios of accounts, look at how they can grow them incrementally, through upselling or cross-selling or adding further value, and looking on a more strategic long-term base of how they can develop that portfolio. So it really does cover that end-to-end program. When we're designing a really great customized program, we work closely with the employer and collaborate with them to identify exactly what else can be built into that curriculum. So if we look on the left-hand side, we try to make sure that we're partnering with that organization to build in product training, technical training, working with their structural elements of the business for organizational development, vision, values, strategy, to really make it feel part of that employer's ongoing training. It shouldn't be something that is seen as a standalone thing that they do. The apprenticeship program should feel as though it's part of their ongoing training and development. Over on the other side of the slide, the behaviors, clearly very important to the success and performance of individuals in sales, which is a high performing activity. So we do work with people to help develop and instill some of those behaviors that are required for success. Really important moment is to look at the time that an individual will need to dedicate to the qualification, but equally the time that the employer and the line managers will need to dedicate. This is a fundamental mandatory requirement of all apprenticeship standards, again, whether it's a level 2 or a level 7 in any discipline. And it is what forms an important part of a program, allowing that individual to have that protected time to focus on training and personal development. The way in which a program is delivered is through various different learning means. I've broken that down into 3 core areas. The first one being structured learning. So that's the learning that is delivered by your training provider that could encompass some of those things we've already discussed. So group training, digital learning, activities to apply and embed learning, and of course the support they spend with their support or the time they spend with their development coach. But equally as important is the time dedicated to the program by their employer. So in both employer-led activities and also line manager-driven activities. And then finally, through their own CPD or self-directed study, some initiatives that will guide the learner to investigate under their own steam. Now, how that looks in practice is outlined on the slide. The headline figure here is that it needs to be a minimum of 6 hours per week. Okay, now when people first see that 6 hours, jaws drop and people take a bit of a gasp and think, wow, how am I going to fit that into my already really busy schedule? Now, clearly we know this has very limited impact on an organization or an individual. If anything, we've seen the opposite. We've seen performance improve immediately as a result of being on program because of some of that training and development and marginal gains that are being achieved in their job. So if we look at that 6 hours, the first thing is it's quite flexible in how and when it can be taken. Doesn't need to be in a full 6 hour block. It can be spread throughout the course of a week. It will ebb and flow a little over the course of the program, but it is required to be taken within contracted hours. So not something that we encourage or ask learners to do outside of their contracted hours. It is to be completed on the job or whilst working. If we look at some of the positives of that over the length of the program, that equates to over 300 hours of CPD. So time planned into their curriculum that enables that individual to really focus and reflect on their performance and their skills. So hopefully a significant amount of time to improve performance and of course enable them to go on and progress their careers. And when we get into curriculum design, it's actually encouraging to know how much of naturally occurring training already happens And when designed properly, that can all be wrapped and encapsulated into the 6 hours. So we're capturing all of the great stuff that is already being undertaken, either by them as individuals, by you as an organization. So things such as product training, sales meetings, any mandatory training, but equally any of the time spent with their line manager on planned shadowing or observations or mentoring of that individual. And then finally, in addition, some of the variety of activities that we will roll into the program. The key thing with this, to make it work, to make sure it doesn't encroach in people's performance, and to stay on track of the program, as that it's all planned in advance. So curriculum teams spend time with stakeholders and line managers to really plan in what those activities will look like, who is responsible for what, so therefore the learner knows at any point in their program what they are doing and what is required. One of the other mandatory requirements of all apprenticeship standards is a degree of competence in maths and English, or referred to as functional skills. So with all level 4 qualifications, there's a requirement for people to have a certain level of maths and English qualification. That's referred to as a level 2 functional skills qualification, or equivalent to a grade C in GCSE in old ways of how that was awarded, now equivalent to a grade 4. So if people have those grades and have achieved those at high school and have the certificates, there's no further work to do on functional skills other than just embedding maths and English in their day-to-day work. If for whatever reason they didn't attain those grades at high school, and that's typically around 40 to 50% of our provision that start this program, we support them with functional skills tutoring to ensure that they are able to take those exams at an agreed point in the program prior to completion of the program. So again, my advice would be that that shouldn't be prohibitive or put people off. It's a really important part of the program and an important part of professional development, acquiring those skills. And again, we all know in sales that maths and English form a significantly important part of the job that we do. As people go through their program and come towards the end, they will be then thinking about how they complete and gain their awards. And that's undertaken through something called an endpoint assessment, or EPA. Two things here. That's not undertaken or not delivered by your training provider or the employer. It's an independent organization that undertakes the assessment of all individuals, called an endpoint assessment organization. And again, it is the employer's choice as to which EPAO they choose. I think it is important to point out that the Institute of Sales Professionals, the ISP, are also an endpoint assessment and therefore can assess and award your learners. When we work with learners and we embark on the program, we use the very famous Stephen Covey phrase of start with the end in mind. So we look at what their starting point is. We look at where their aspirations are with regard to what they want to get out of the program, both from a personal development and also from a qualification. And we make sure we stick to that learning plan, stretching and challenging learners as they go through that progression. The outcomes are that unfortunately people can fail. It's quite rare, but it could happen. They can pass or they can gain a distinction. So we work very closely with individuals to find out what they're ideally aspiring to and are able to teach and educate them to the standard that they're looking for there. The endpoint assessment can take up to a maximum of 4 months, which again can sound quite a long time, but actually there is only 3 elements and they are spaced out to enable the learner to have appropriate time on each of them. But just to give you a quick overview of them, once the learner completes the practical learning period, they go through a process of what's called gateway, just to confirm that they have completed all of the learning and the mandatory requirements of the qualification before going into that assessment. The first element of that is the completion and submission of 4 work-based projects. So this is the written element of the program. They are issued with a number of titles of case studies, and those case studies need to be written on real-life scenarios that have happened in the workplace based on their job. So examples of work that they've done with customers. So it could include a negotiation that's been undertaken, an account that's been developed, an account that's been acquired. So they're able to pick those that apply most relevance to their job. So once completed, they're submitted and marked. And when successful, they're invited to the second and the third stage of that endpoint assessment. The first part of that being a PowerPoint presentation, where they're able to present to that individual assessor their organization, its products or services, and the market they operate in. So something they'll be very comfortable with come the end of the program, and had lots of time to practice and to undertake presentation skills training. That's followed by a Q&A with the assessor. They then have a short break when they then move into the final part, which is a professional discussion. So that's a formal conversation with the assessor, similar to a competency-based interview, where they again share some of their experiences and how they've been able to apply the knowledge, the skills, or behaviors to the job during the program and what impact it's had as a result. And then shortly after that, they receive their awards, their qualifications, and hopefully then go on to graduate and celebrate that. So hopefully that gives a whistle-stop tour of the qualification, how it's delivered. So just move on now to the funding element, because I know this does often cause confusion with some employers. And there's 2 models to consider. The firstly is for those employers that do contribute into the apprenticeship levy. So if your organisation has a payroll of £3 million or more per year, you will automatically pay 0.5% of that into a digital apprenticeship account, or something known as the DASH, the Digital Apprenticeship Service. And that is retained and protected and can solely be used to fund apprenticeship standards. It cannot be used to help recruit or for any other qualifications other than apprenticeship standards. So often large employers have a significant fund or sum of money available to them to spend on either the training of new staff or the upskilling of existing staff. And it's then up to that organisation to identify what apprenticeship standards are relevant for the training or the skills gaps within their organisation, so whether it's sales or marketing or management, and then to choose a training provider that they feel is qualified and experienced to deliver that standard. If you are classed as an SME and therefore don't have a payroll of £3 million or more, there is a model called co-investment, which is an incredibly generous scheme where government contribute 95% of the funding band for that standard, and the employer only has to contribute 5%. The funding band for the level for sales executive is £6,000, and that's not a training provider agreed standard funding band, that's government approved funding for that. Finally, if you are a smaller business that has less than 50 employees, you do actually receive 100% of funding for the program. So again, it's a tremendous opportunity to invest in highly reputable, credible training for your team members through this government-funded program. Some things to bear in mind and some myths that actually we all have, or some preconceptions around what an apprenticeship is. is that apprenticeships are only for school leavers or for early careers people or for low skilled paids or for very vocational roles. That is completely wrong. Apprenticeship standards now, of which there are over 300, cover all aspects of skills and departments within organizations, as we've mentioned, through professional selling, marketing, finance, accountancy, data science, and range in levels from 2 to 7. So you may be surprised that there'll be people within organizations studying for master's degrees or MBAs that could be very senior directors or stakeholders of organizations, through to first line or second line managers, or those that have a number of years of experience within that organization. Equally, the funding can be used to upskill new starters or people that are retraining. What I've tried to do here is help you to identify what the sweet spot is for this level 4 sales qualification, because we know in sales teams there can often be quite a broad range of experience or length of service. And whilst there is no definitive answer to this, because the level 4 is quite a broad standard, there is only the level 4. We tend to get people to think that it's ideally suited for those with between 0 and 5 years business to business sales experience. But the key thing here is looking at the eligibility of who's going to be relevant for that. And that eligibility therefore relates to whether that person is eligible to be funded for the program. So there's a couple of things here to help you, again, visualize those people, but they need to be living or working for more than 50% of their time in England. That is a mandatory requirement. So we do have to do our due diligence and certain checks to ensure that that is either being achieved. If people don't live in England, but do spend over 50% of the time working in England, or if for whatever reason they spend time outside of the UK or England as well, we need to make sure that 50% or more is in England. They also need to be able to apply the knowledge, skills and behaviours to their day-to-day job. So they have to already be in a role that's applicable to the standard. So in this case, they have to be in a sales role in order to be able to apply all of the knowledge, skills and behaviours to their day-to-day tasks. We also need to check that they have no prior formally recognised sales qualifications or accreditations, which we find is quite rare because there's very few, if any, other sales qualifications that have been available historically. And funding rules require them not to be already receiving funding for other types of training or qualifications. So I have to make sure there's no overlap there. So through our experience and through working with the ISP, again, that sweet spot could be between 0 and 5 years of business to business sales experience. However, we do have people that have had significantly more experience than that in their job. However, when we've looked at their skill scans or had interviews with them, it's evident that throughout their time in sales, for whatever the reason, they've not had the fortune of formal or accredited sales training. As often happens in sales, people have fallen into their job, they've performed relatively well, but have learned through their own endeavors. So this is an opportunity to really give them that formal training and accreditation in professional selling. I think 2 things here that highlight the gravitas of the program, given it's a level 4, a higher level qualification, and the length of the program, is people really need to be committed to forging a long-term career in sales. This is an opportunity not only to gain that accreditation and to help them improve performance, but it will give them the platform to go on and progress their career and be able to use that as an opportunity to show their commitment to their career. And if they do go into key accounts, national account sales management, always having that formal accreditation on their CV. And committed to CPD. We've found some learners that absolutely love learning and development and investing in themselves. Maybe they've recently come out of college or university, so find that natural progression. But if people haven't been in learning for a while, it's really having the enthusiasm to going back to learning and development, and are committed to doing that for the right reasons. If you have both internal or office-based as well as external sales people, the program can work. And again, whether it's for new business or account management or hybrid roles, again, the program is suitable. So things to consider if you are an employer thinking, okay, that sounds great. What do I need to bear in mind if rolling this out? I think it's firstly that collectively as an organization, from senior stakeholders right through to line managers and through to the learners, is that there's that overarching investment in CPD, that desire to upskill your teams to ensure that you do become an employer of choice, and that recognizing the importance in development of people and the long-term gains you'll get from that. I think it's being very aware of that development time and the commitment that learners will need to make, and making sure that is something that you are prepared to offer to the individuals to enable them to complete the qualification. The role of the line managers in the program cannot be underestimated. In our experience, they can make or break a program. So line managers really need to be engaged from the outset. They need to be supportive, they need to be skilled at coaching and mentoring, and really make sure that they are front and center of the program with their learner as they're going through that 18 months. And finally, on that 18 months, it's that long-term commitment, recognizing that this is an ongoing or a sustained program of learning. It can't just be turned on or off. It can't be dropped if something of importance takes over. It needs to be planned into that 18-month journey so that the learner doesn't fall behind. However, if you can commit to all of those things, the program is second to none. It's almost, why wouldn't you do this given the qualification, the funding, and the level of depth that the program covers? I think the final things to consider then are the bigger picture. If we go back to the poll, attraction of new salespeople accounted to 22% of people's biggest challenges. So if you are advertising or looking to recruit new salespeople, it's a really great thing to offer as part of the package, that you are wanting to invest in those people. You are going to put them on an accredited training program, and that can often be a significant point of difference when learners or applicants are thinking about who they should choose. So again, it adds to your employer's value proposition. I think recruitment savings come hand in hand with that. If you are able to recruit better people, that will in turn lower recruitment costs, but equally it will have lots of impact on hidden costs, such as maybe the length of time that those vacancies are unfilled, the churn of accounts or customers that may generate if you don't have salespeople on territory or looking after those portfolios. So therefore not allowing those competitors to come in and maybe make some ground on your accounts. And of course, less staff turnover. So it will in essence help you to retain and develop those people. So that means you're having to spend less time recruiting, and you're also building a pipeline of qualified, ambitious sales professionals that hopefully want to go on and progress with your organization, because it will also help with that degree of loyalty. The most important thing that you as an employer will gain from this is improved performance across your sales community. By having accredited and professionally trained salespeople, that understand all of the aspects of that end-to-end sales process will be more thorough, will be more analytical, will be more professional, and therefore will have a better performance rate, conversion rate, and achievement rate within their customers. So if you multiply that across your salespeople, the return that you will get compared to the time invested significantly outweighs it with regard to performance. And then the fourth and final thing is that recognition. Working closely with a partner like the ISP or a training provider to gain that status, loads of other things that come with that as well, like being a corporate member of the Institute, completing an ethics exam that shows that you are an ethical sales organization, I think can have huge value to the employer and to that organization. For example, we encourage people to use this on their proposals, on their collateral, on their website even, to show that they are investing in people. So finally, if we circle back and think of the key takeaways from this session, hopefully that's given you a little bit more insight now into how the program is funded and some of the watch outs for that with regard to the compliance that's non-negotiable. It's a mandatory part of the course. But equally for those of you that who are eligible and what level of funding you receive, how that program is delivered through that blended program over an 18-month sustained program of learning and the different learning interventions. And then maybe hopefully have shared a bit of insight to help you decide on, is this right for your organization? As an organization, can you commit to the requirements of it? And who it's right for within your sales team. It may not be for everybody, but to try and help you visualize and identify who's going to get the most value from this, whether it's all of the team or certain members. So I'll take a pause. Thank you so much for listening. I'll hand back to Dan now, who has been monitoring, I think, the questions to see if we can answer any questions for you.
Thank you so much. That was incredibly insightful and informative. Really, just a couple of quick reflections before we jump into the questions. What I really got from that was the level of customization and contextualization that you're able to put into your training program, given that it is a standard that's developed by a Trailblazer group and you're given the standard. But perhaps you can just maybe just speak to that a little bit more in terms of the level of depth and what you're able to do with employers in terms of turning that into training that really does have a day-to-day impact and benefit on those salespeople.
Yeah, when we embark on the partnership with a client, we look at three levels. Firstly, we look at the core knowledge, skills, and behaviors of the standard. We then go a layer below that and think, right, how can we customize this for that employer? So looking at their own values and vision, their sales methodology or process, the language that they use, the objectives they have as a sales force and what they're looking to achieve come the end, even down to things such as their branding and their brand guidelines. How do we make it look and feel like an in-house program? The next layer that we go down to is how do we further individualize that for each learner? Because whilst they'll all be studying the same qualification, they'll inevitably have slightly different developmental needs or aspirations that they want to get out. So then our coaches will individualize that for the learner to make sure that their learning journey and learning plan is really giving them the value that they want.
It's absolutely incredible. And all at the cost of, if you're a levy paying employer, obviously it comes through your apprenticeship levy, but if you are a non-levy paying employer, 5% of the so all of this for 300 quid or possibly for free if you meet the eligibility requirements of the free training. That's correct.
That is absolutely right. Yeah, so that's a commercially invoiced element of the program, and the rest is funded through government, which we draw the fundings from. So it's a hugely valuable scheme, and as I say, from a compliance point of view, if an organization is comfortable with that, it's almost a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you? If you're wanting to invest in people, you know they're going to get value from it and you're comfortable with the compliance. There's a really hard argument to say, why wouldn't you choose to do this over a traditional commercially funding training program?
Absolutely. Thanks, Dave, so much. We have had a couple of questions that come in, so I'm just going to read them out as they've been sent in, if you don't mind. So the first question was, how is the functional skills element of the programme supported alongside also doing the apprenticeship and, of course, the salesperson's day-to-day job?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that does need to be considered, because functional skills work is done in addition to the apprenticeship qualification and, of course, in addition to their day job. If somebody does need that support, we run an individual diagnostic with them right at the outset of the program to identify what learning is required in order to complete the functional skill qualification and what that one-to-one support looks like. So we as a provider have functional skills tutors who work solely on that, and they work with learners on a distance learning basis to plan their learning to fit in around their job, but also the amount of work that's needed. We recommend that people start functional skills really early into their program, so it doesn't become a barrier towards the end. And we also recommend that they start one at a time. So maybe start, if they require both, start with English, get that boxed off, and then start with maths. Dan, it's difficult to give an accurate timeline because it does differ depending on what that individual's starting point is, but it could be anywhere from a couple of weeks up to 3 months, dependent on where they're at.
We've had another question that's come through. So if an organisation perhaps has customer service roles or business administration roles, and those individuals perhaps seeking a career in sales, would this be a suitable route for those to move from those roles into a sales role, and they could do this as a means to develop their knowledge, skills and behaviours in that sales role?
Yeah, it can't be completed whilst they're full-time in their customer service or an administrative role, because they have to be able to apply the knowledge, the skills and behaviours into real life scenarios. So where that is the situation, we work with the employer to identify if and how they're able to give that individual the exposure to some of those responsibilities of a sales professional within their organisation. So that could mean giving them extra responsibility, extra exposure, allowing them some elements of their time. So one day a week maybe to shadow or to visit customers or to get involved in some of those activities. So it would need to be clearly planned in order for that individual to be able to complete the qualification.
Thanks. And finally, there's a question around employer/line manager that you mentioned before. I guess this is variable dependent on the individual, but can you typically kind of give an idea of how much time a line manager might need to be involved on a weekly or perhaps even monthly basis to ensure that that apprentice is fully supported?
Yeah, so firstly, if we look at the stakeholders of the business, their time is required early on in the development and the design of the program, where we're trying to bring in some of that naturally occurring or mandatory company-wide training. So that is where we work with the stakeholders. The line manager would be required to attend what we call milestone reviews with the learner and their coach every 10 weeks. And that's a really important session to be able to understand what learning's happened to date, plan out what's going to be happening in that next period of training, and also to make sure that individual is on track and has been able to apply the learning into their job. We often find with sales managers that if they're doing their job well, they'll often be spending time on a one-to-one basis with that individual. So that could be coaching, shadowing, giving them feedback, having one-to-ones, spending the day on the road with them, observing where elements of that could be captured. So actually, it forms a natural part of the sales manager's job, and that's when we would look to get that planned into the curriculum. So what we found with most sales managers, it doesn't really impact any more additional time than what they're doing already with their team members if they are quite supportive and involved in the development of their team.
Fabulous, Dave. That's amazing. Thank you so much for that. We have had one. It's not much of a question, rather than the comment really, which is really pleased, but I will read it out. I have used this apprenticeship previously with my team, so can fully endorse the programme. And can I have a copy of the presentation or further information I can share with my team. So from a presentation perspective, absolutely, we'll be publishing this recording and getting the slide deck available. But Dave, in terms of how people might want to get more information about this apprenticeship, what should they do?
Yeah, I'd be very happy to answer any questions on the apprenticeship directly. So if people want to call me or email me, I'll share my details afterwards on the slide deck. We often host what we call information sessions for employers, which is just to really talk either the stakeholders or their learners through, or the potential learners through what the program is, warts and all, to help them to think, is it right for their business or for them as individuals? And that can be very useful as well to identify if it's going to add value. Equally, if people go to our website, there's lots of examples of case studies and testimonials from both learners and employers that have completed the program.